Hi there from Sydney on a winter's afternoon, getting pretty dark out there already. I'll be talking in this video about scheduling for time and energy. Now, I've been looking at time management for a very long time, into the decades. It is very dry a lot of the time. Few and far between are people that can make it interesting. And I've been contemplating this also for my own work and my own business, my own when I've been in jobs because it is an issue that I think really divides people in terms of people that are good at it are able to really get a sense of satisfaction from their work. And I work a lot about burnout being tiredness, cynicism, detachment, loss of productivity in our work. So what I see in that is that people that can command their time and energy are more fulfilled. And there's obviously a correlation or relationship between whether you can do that in your role, and obviously it depends on how much autonomy you have in your role. And I've heard pretty much every kind of but, yes, but excuse about not dealing with this topic. So I am a little bit more hardline when I talk about this. But let me just say it is from a heart space and it's from a lot of experience. And it is something that we need to come to terms with, all the more for the digital disruption in our world these days, all the more for the problems our young people are having being on screens, all the more for, the amount of information out there that we need to be able to be present, to be able to sift through and work out what's relevant for us and what's credible as well in what we need to know. So that said, this guideline and worksheet, similar to the other worksheets, in this series, have come from the burnout prevention workshops, which led to what I call the burnout prevention framework and a bunch of tools that sit under that framework. And what we want to do here is look at our relationship with time and energy and intentionally design our work as much as possible and be able to make adjustments to it in an ongoing manner to actually meet the demands of our work and protect our well-being and align with our values. Now, that's a possibly gobbledygook, long-winded way of saying time management, why people do it. It is essentially because we want to be able to direct our time and energy to where it matters to us and also be able to manage relationships with other people and their expectations and the way they do their calendars. Now, one of the things that's come about in recent years is this idea of ways of working, and this is in the debate about whether we should be in offices and hybrid and remote work and what should be enforced from an employment law point of view and things like that. Now, this I have offered as an alternative, and it sits alongside those discussions because it lets people get really clear on what works for them, and the organisation usually can't accommodate a lot of that. And yet, it is still important to do it and to be clear for yourself, because even if there's one or two things that you can put in place from working through this guideline and worksheet, it will make a difference to how you feel about your work, and you'll be able to see more opportunities to tweak how you work and to work with other people more consciously and deliberately in a way that better suits your time and energy. So it is a little bit of an ambitious statement on my behalf here to say that this is the kind of future I see with people and time management. Putting together a policy statement on how we're all going to work together and have these generic ways and tools and platforms where we hit and miss, and some of it's synchronous, some of it's completely out of time on different platforms. I hear so many, I'm not going to say horror stories. Horror stories came to mind, obviously, honestly. It's not quite horror stories. It's quite a bit sadder than that. It's a bit more like these really missed attempts at communication or this illusion that we are communicating when we're not. So now that I've entertained my soapbox a little bit there, the two parts of this guideline is on prevention and the guardrails for peak periods. So prevention is, as this came about, was in the period after, this was at the time after the new year. But any period of time where you have a little window, a little golden window, as we call it, to think about the next period of time coming up. That could be the next month, it could be the next year, it could be the next week if it's like that for you. This is this idea of actually being able to see what's on our plate in this upcoming period and be able to understand where those pressure points are and what kinds of systems or resources we have at our disposal when we're really going to be under the fire. And that links to some of the other resources under the framework as well. Now, the other part is the guardrails for peak periods, and that is all about how things change when you go under the pump, when we get in that feeling of being completely compressed and overwhelmed by calendars and time and trying to squash things in, and having to constantly change our calendars, and we lose that ability to be really clear about what's important to us. And it can be very reactive. So we want to move to being more proactive, even under those difficult conditions, a bit like how they teach, people in emergency services. You've got to be able to operate clearly under pressure. So there are some principles we're going to work with. So we talk about time management. We also talk about energy management. So for anyone recovering from a health condition or dealing with possibly insomnia or dealing with mental health issues or neurodiversity, these types of people are more aware of energy management, even though it might sound a bit woo-woo. But energy management is knowing when you have the best time of the day to do a task and matching that as much as possible when you can, even if it's small windows of commitment. So one of the natures of our human condition is we want to design this perfect, fantasy workday scenario where we have these long hours or these, perfect situations with other people being available when we want them. That's not how it works. How do we chunk it down and focus on what we can do within our own control, and then be able to just create in small chunks of time around what's important to us? Now, in the morning, for example, I get a lot of people I speak to get a lot more energy around, their mind is fresh in the morning. Over time, classically, we kind of lose a bit of the oomph, but often in the afternoon, we might get second winds and late at night as well. Some people do work late into the night and like to do that. And it can still be healthy. We don't want to standardize people into this is, your body physiology requires this. It's just for you to know for yourself within your lifestyle constraints, within your work constraints and your role constraints and family and everything else, how can you best match your energy to the time you have? We're deliberately prioritizing. That's another principle we'll be talking about. So we're not just accepting other people's priorities. We're going to be able to actually consciously understand where other people are coming from and be able to communicate better around time and scheduling, so that these conversations, you might see them in what are they called? Not GIFs, memes. Whereas that could have been a meeting. You might hear that saying where people are like, sorry, I got it wrong. That could have been an email, right? Or that email, that, let's try again. When people basically are going to a meeting and it could have been sorted out in an email. That's what I meant. So these clashes, because for another person, that's actually not true. They really wanted an opportunity to speak, but they might not have actually been even able to speak at that meeting. So we've got to understand this is highly subjective and that's not a bad thing. We just want to be clear about it so that we can understand that other people have different subjective experiences of how they want to set up their time and prioritize their time. Now, the other part of this is adaptability. This is, I mean, we all know this. I don't even need to tell you probably that, you can make a calendar and God, if you believe in God, God laughs at people that make plans. That's the saying I've heard in different groups over time. And it's just this idea that what's the point of planning? And people start to get defeatist around this idea of planning at all because it's not going to happen anyway. But I think that what I find with working with people is having the attitude or the discipline of the planner, but also understanding that a lot of it might not go that way at all. It's a bit like show business where you turn up on the night, you plan, you rehearse, you do everything you can, and you turn up on stage and the lights go on. You've got to deal with whatever's going on. It is still very much this kind of world that we're working with in work. It's a tongue twister. So we're going to let that be, but also allow that there's limits to adaptability and there's times when we do need to hold stronger. And when we're preventing burnout, we want to be able to be really aware of what gives us energy and what's important to us and what feels like satisfaction or productivity in the formal language of burnout. It's one of the symptoms we're less productive. So what feels like an achievement for us, because that's being of service to others. We might think it's selfish. We might think it's, things that we've got to say no to that when we shouldn't, but we've got to be really clear about when that's actually serving our profession and our integrity as a professional, and then ultimately getting a better product for people, whether we're, delivering to customers, clients, whoever they are. So that is the mindset shift that goes on with this. So as I said at the beginning, calendaring, scheduling, time management can be very boring topics, but we want to put them in the context here of giving us satisfaction in our work. That is the goal. That is where your North Star is here, to have more satisfaction. Now, even if you're not career orientated or ambitious, it might be more just a survival headspace you're in where you want to not have as many problems coming up from, poorly, work that was substandard or issues with customers or issues with family or being able to go home and still have energy after your shift. There can be a whole lot of other objectives and goals that people have. This isn't about being a high climber, ambitious person. This is about being someone who's really clear on why they work, how they work, and how they help others with their work and where their limits are, and how time and energy and being prepared in advance for those peak periods and having tools to look at your calendar and actually work out what happened. That can be retrospectively or proactively. So after a really heavy period of work, it's good to look back and see what happened when things went off the rails, if you go off the rails. Or if you're coming into a new period where you're going to get some peak period cycles around, whether it's financial year, whether it's auditing, whether it's high customer peak demand and events, that your industry has trends that are known and fairly repeatable in that regard. So get on that front foot and understand what kinds of things help when you're in those peak periods, and you'll be able to hold those boundaries a lot better with your time and your energy, and your calendar will be your friend. And it's a work in progress. We're all playing this game together. Let me know how you go. We'll be publishing a bit more on this, but it's good to get any feedback on how you go with this. Thank you.